We are going to start the service, and we always start in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Death is never an easy subject, and we know that this is a passage that everybody has to go through, we all. But when that comes close to us, to a friend, to a family member, it's always hitting us very hard. And that is when we should remember the words of the Lord when he told us, "Come to me, all of you who are suffering, who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." When we do that and connect with our God, then we feel the peace in our hearts. Otherwise, despair is going to take place. And today we are here to celebrate the life of James Edwin Fulton, Dr. Fulton. I'm going to start with Psalm 23 in a responsorial way, and we are going to answer, "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want." The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. He guides me in a straight path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Let us pray. Lord God, you are the glory of believers and the life of the just. Your Son redeemed us by dying and rising to life again. Since our friend James believed in the mystery of our own resurrection, let him share the joys and blessings of the life to come. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The first thing that comes to our minds when we go through this situation is prayer. And prayer doesn't mean that we have to go by any special rite. It's just opening our hearts to God and talking to God about the ordeals that we are getting into our lives, the challenges that life is presenting to us. And in this case, prayer is going to help us to go through this grieving period very easy. The second may be to go to the scriptures and find something motivational, and I'm sure that each one of us is going to go to a different page, because there are authors that they are telling us more than others, that we understand better than others. Since I was in the seminary, I loved Solomon, and Solomon, as you know, was a long-standing king of Israel. Some people believe that he was the best. He was also the one that made most of the public works, that built the temple, and also he's known for his judgments. And then almost at the end of his life, he wrote this book called Ecclesiastes. In Hebrew is Keholet. And Keholet is a person that speaks in the square just to the other people to understand things that are going on in their own lives. And in chapter 3 of Keholet, Ecclesiastes, he says, there is a time to everything, and a moment to do it under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to cry, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. And then he says, at the end, what has the person after all their toils? And he says that I started to consider the many centers of interest that God presents to all persons, and I noticed the following. He has made everything beautiful in its time, but he also invites us to look at the whole, and we are unable to discover the global sense of God's work from the beginning even to the end. And this phrase is maybe the most important of the whole book because he repeats in the different chapters of the book the same phrase. We are unable to discover the global sense of God's work from the beginning to the end. As Christians and as Jews and whatever our religions may be, we understand that God's work on us starts with our birth. And he said, go, enjoy your life, fulfill your life, procreate, and return to the Father when you are called. And if we do it in that way with faith, then we can go easy, and the ones that we remain on this earth, we can take it easy too. But the key maybe is in the first phrase. There is a time to everything, but just a moment to do it under the heaven. And that moment is our own lives. And our lives in the space and in time are nothing because they are going so fast that we cannot believe it. Every morning when we wake up, those of us that have some age already can feel the body telling us the messages. Things are not like yesterday. And it looks like yesterday to me that I was in the seminary playing soccer, playing tennis, playing everything. And now every morning is the cracks and the aches and pains of the age. And that tells us about the fragility of life. And life is a precious gift that we have. Our friend James lost it through a week before at 73 years old, relatively young guy. And also a terrible cancer, colon cancer. But the key is not how long do we live, is how do we live our own life? How do we conform our lives to the God's work, the one that he is asking us to do? And he really took advantage of his life in life because he did everything that he wanted. He was committed to something. He had a vocation that was very strong, and that he dedicated his whole life to do that. Medicine, research, and he was an innovator and a true pioneer. He devoted all his life to dermatology, and his passing will leave us a void in the world of skincare. That says his wife, Sarah Fulton. They were very close. They were always working together, traveling together, going to all the congresses and everything together. 47 years of marriage. And then the children. He was always thinking about the children, to progress in life, to study, to get ahead, to get the best that they could in their own life. And this is the message, that this fragility of life, we have to be aware of that. And in a moment like this, that we are remembering a person that took advantage of that life with all his ganas, with all his guts. He really took everything with him and gave him the motives to be helpful to all the others. When we talk priests as the building of the kingdom of God, everybody thinks that this is a philosophy that is going to happen later on. It's every day on our work that we are building the kingdom of God. And he was a spiritual person, was not very religious, but he was very spiritual. And his spirit was help the others, build the kingdom of God through helping the others. And that is the message. I was this weekend in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, in a meeting with the Federation of Christian Ministers. And it was interesting because all of us were outside the Roman Catholic Church, and there we still consider ourselves Romans, but we are not under the Pope. And it's fantastic to see all these people, very many ages, different ages, married people with children, still dedicated to serving the others through the priesthood. And to me, that I'm now single, I'm practicing celibacy, then I can tell you that that was so uplifting, so good to see all these people working for the kingdom. That was one of the themes that one of the Baptist ministers that came was talking about, that the kingdom is the one that we do every day. And this has been always clear to me, that the more we do for the others, the better off we are going to be on our own, on our circle, on our family. And that's where Sarah was telling me about his life. Susan, the daughter, then Ricky, her husband, also James, Anissa, Isabel, and then Kelly, working with him in the company, and John, and also George. All the people around him, they were committed to the same thing, working for the others. He did so many things without charging anything to anybody. And when we make jokes about doctors and lawyers, we know that money is always there. He didn't care about money. Sarah was telling me that he was the most giving person that she has known. He was helping the people from the foster homes, people in need from everywhere that came to him. He did everything for them free. And then also he was giving not only his service, but also the medicines. He was taking care of everything that they needed. And this is a clear example of the person that took advantage of that time under the heaven. And this is maybe the example that we can adapt to our own and also go through that. He also, as you know, discovered, together with Dr. Albert Klingman, they co-developed the Retin A, that topical form of vitamin A, just to iron some of our wrinkles. And he was very dedicated to discover solutions for the acne. That was maybe that disease or that problem that he had when he was a young guy, is the one that they make him to work so hard to discover means to help everybody that had that type of situation, that type of problems. He has worked in so many places. He has written maybe 300 medical articles. This year in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, and presented at the Skin of Color seminar series in New York City. He has been all over the world, supporting people from all over the world. Sarah was telling me that one of his people, the proteges that he had, called her from India. And he was a very young guy, and he is there because he helped him to be there. He has helped many other people, and you doctors and you people that knew him very well know how many things he did for the others. The message is that fragility of life, awareness of our lives that can go at any time, by any means, and at all age. I have been a chaplain at Miami Children's for 5 years, very hard years there, at Jackson, and also with Vitas. And I have seen death at all ages and for all causes. But the important is not those things, is that I'm aware of the fragility of life and that I have to take my life, the moment that we have under the heaven, with all our ganas, our gusto, to take that out of our lives and give to the others the service that they deserve. He did that in a very outstanding way. I can be talking like maybe 3 hours and I have like 4 pages here. I want to save you that, because the key, as I said before, is that whatever we do, we have to focus 100% on that. And if any challenge that life has presented to us in the past are still bugging us, nagging us, and we are not in the present, but we are kind of in the past and in the present and go one way and the other, that's not good because we are wasting our own time under the heaven. And to accomplish these words of the Lord, we have to really be aware of the moment that we have under the heaven and the global work that he is asking us to do. Jesus as a person was not strange to death. And as a human, he also experienced the grieving, because when he was called at the death of his friend Lazarus, he took 4 days to arrive there. And as you know, in the Jewish tradition, that is not possible, because they dispose of the bodies in the first 24 hours. So he was like 5 days late. And Martha, the sister of Lazarus, confronted him and says, like, if you have been here, my brother will be still alive. And then is when he said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Those words are the key in our faith, the resurrection, the final moment in our lives in the world. When I was in Rome, I went to one of the catacombs there in Rome, and it was interesting to see the representation of death in many ways. But in this catacomb that I was visiting, under St. Peter's Square, there is this graffiti on top of one of the tombs, and it was Etruscan. And the Etruscans, as you know, were prior to the Romans. And there was this painting there that was a hand holding a torch down, like saying, life is gone, the light is off, so that's it, nothing else. And across that one is the Christian. And they took the same elements, the hand, the torch, they put it up, and they painted the flame. At some point, I think that is the case, because we celebrate the life of our friend James Edwin Fulton by thanking God for the life that we shared, that we participated in so many instances with him, in the hospital, in the office, anywhere. And that is the time to say thank you for the life, because his body is out of this world, but his spirit is in our hearts. And we are going to remember him in all those situations that we may go through life that we may think, even when we use, or someone uses the Retin A, or all the other ointments for the acne. That is the most important part, because then we learn about our own fragility, and then that we take advantage of this time that we have under the heaven. Now we are going to pray for our friend, and we are going to say, Lord, hear our prayers. With faith and hope in eternal life, let us pray for our friend James Edwin Fulton. Lord, you cried at the death of your friend Lazarus. Comfort us in our sorrow for the loss of our friend James. You raised the dead to life. Give our friend eternal life. You purified James through the waters of baptisms and anointed him with the oil of salvation. Give our friend fellowship with all your saints. We ask this in faith. Lord, hear our prayers. And for all of us who still remain on this earth, that we understand the fragility of life, that we understand the importance of taking the best of this life that God, you have given us, and that we may be also fulfilling our own lives as James did, and we may be consoled by God's word. We ask this in faith. Lord, hear our prayers. And now, all together, we are going to say the prayer that Jesus taught the apostles, the Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Let us pray. God of mercy, hear our prayers and be merciful to our friend James, whom you have called from this life. Welcome James into the company of your saints in the kingdom of light and peace. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Give James eternal rest, O Lord, and may your light shine on him forever. Amen.
For anyone who may not know me, I'm Kelly, Dr. Fulton's daughter. Okay, we'll try again. Can you hear me now? We're good? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kelly. I'm Dr. Fulton's daughter. On behalf of my entire family, I thank you all for coming here today to help us say goodbye to my father and to celebrate his life. The outpouring of support that we have received has been truly special, and it is evidence of the many, many lives that he touched. We hear over and over again from people across all continents that say, Dr. Fulton changed my life. Our family is proud to have been a part of his remarkable journey, and we will continue his legacy. I would like to say a special thank you to the medical team and to the Vivant team. Without your loyalty and your support, Dr. Fulton would not have been able to continue his work as long as he did. Now I'd like to introduce my brother, George Fulton.
It's slightly unfair, as you all know, that I have to lower it as her brother. Sorry. I'm George Hodges Fulton. I'm Dr. Fulton's youngest son. As Kelly said, thank you all so much for coming. And of course, what would be a funeral in the 21st century without a little technology, right? So apologize. My family and I do truly appreciate you all being here, and I know my father would have been so happy to see so many of you gathered all together in one room. As many of you know, my father always was helping people regardless of the environment or how he came to meet them. I would like to share one quick story that was shared with us in the past week from one of the many well-wishers. And I think you all agree that it epitomizes my father. Quote, "We were so sorry to learn of Jim's passing. I will never forget the first time I met him. He was standing on our deck in Miami Beach, and as I walked outside to greet him, he looked up at me and exclaimed, 'Wow, perioral fluoride rash.' The amazing thing was that he was the first and only person to diagnose it, and he did it from 20 feet away. Everyone else was testing me for lupus. I quit using fluoride toothpaste, and it went away," unquote. So, as you all know, medicine was my father's passion, and through it, he was able to help countless people. His contributions make me think of the words of another great doctor, Dr. Seuss. "Don't cry because it is over. Smile because it happened." Again, thank you all for coming and supporting our family. Next, I'd like to bring up Dr. Luis Escalada.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Luis Escalada. I was Jim's roommate for 2 years of undergraduate school and 4 years of medical school. We had some other roommates in and out. And I like to think that you have two kinds of friends, one that becomes your friend when you're an adult, and then there's the friends from childhood or when you're being formed, and I think that's really where Jim and I started our friendship, in that peculiar hell called medical school. We were very psychologically mismatched. Jim, as you know, was dynamic, studied hard, came out second in his class. I think the other guy cheated. And I was inclined to start reading novels and sleep too much and was basically lethargic. But I would look over and see Jim studying, and then I would get guilty, and then I would keep going. And so, but we had, over the years, we ended up actually talking about a lot of things, and you know, for a couple of relatively nerdy people, slowly got to know each other in a certain kind of way. And, you know, well, when we saw each other, I don't think we had really much interest in what the other person was doing. I had no idea that he'd written 300 papers, and he had no idea whether I'd treated so-and-so well or not. So we had a different kind of relationship, and it was very special to me as far as a bond with another human being. To give you an example of how outrageous he could be with his obsessions with health, we went to visit him in Steamboat Springs, and he had decided that eating oatmeal in great quantities would keep him free of heart disease. And so he said, we're going to work on this recipe. And so we got all the ingredients, but he didn't realize that it produced about 90 muffins. And I said, you know, we're going to be exploding with fiber. He also tended to overdo things, and it almost killed us one night. The temperature went down to 13 degrees in New Orleans. We were freezing, so we turned on the gas heaters, and they weren't doing much good. So Jim says, we got to turn on the stove, we got to light the oven, we got everything. I said, I don't know, that sounds a little risky, but no, he said, we got to be warm. So he took over, and we woke up the next morning with blinding headaches and almost killed ourselves with carbon monoxide. So that was kind of Jim. So we saw each other off and on during the years with Sarah, who was basically Jim's, I'd say, mouthpiece, because Jim sort of kept his feelings to himself, but Sarah helped steer him through that world. And sadly, I was down here for a tennis tournament the first time I'd stayed at their home, and 2 days before that, Jim had the colonoscopy that was the beginning of the end. And I just wanted to mention the one last call he made to me, and it was typical of him taking care of people, because I always say that good doctors, basically, they don't take care of themselves often, but they take care of other people. And he had called me while I was in Vermont, taking care of some other matters. And I had missed the call because it was so isolated, and I saw these 2 calls waiting for me when I finally got to the airport in Atlanta, heading home. And I called Jim after I got home, and he said, I needed to talk to you, I missed you, which was not a characteristic thing to say. And I said, what's going on? And then just very cleverly and imperceptibly, he started getting me to talk about some things that were bothering me. And he had become like my doctor. And so his ability to take care of people was remarkable. Finally, I interrupted him, and he went into a few details. This was only about a month before he died. And clearly he was saying goodbye to me, and it was a very sad phone call. So he was a dear friend, and you know, a bond that was welded in our youth, such as it is, and I'm going to miss him a great deal. I did want to not write a poem, I wish I could have written something. This poem was written by O'Hara, and was I read it at my wife's funeral. I didn't read it, I had somebody read it for me. But this kind of captures sort of this is for Sarah actually, and I wanted her to imagine that Jim would be reading this to her if he would be inclined to read you a little bit of poetry. And it's an unusual poem, but I hope it works. It's called Animals. Have you forgotten what we were like then, when we were still first rate, and the day came fat with an apple in its mouth? It's no use worrying about time, but we did have a few tricks up our sleeves and turned some sharp corners. The whole pasture looked like our meal. We didn't need speedometers. We could manage cocktails out of ice and water. I wouldn't want to be faster or greener than now if you were with me. Oh, you were the best of all my days. So, thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? I joined Jim in 1971 for a research project on the effect of benzoyl peroxide and retin-A on acne. I had only been in this country for 3 weeks, and Jim had been 3 years out of his residency and an assistant professor at the University of Miami Department of Dermatology. I was very nervous and very self-conscious of my heavy Persian accent. But soon I gained my comfort and my composure because he was so reassuring and so kind, and I expressed my desire to join his research team. He expressed regrets and said that he does not have the fund to pay me. And I said that that would not stop me, and I'd like to start on that research project. And the next day, I started working, and I was so thrilled that he accepted me. He had no reservation about my heavy Persian accent, nor was he bothered with the fact that I was pregnant. We're talking about 40 years ago, when being pregnant and employment did not go together. Pregnancy was a taboo for employment. He said with a smile that his wife Sarah was equally pregnant. 3 months later, while he was admiring my diligent effort on the project, he informed me that he was able to obtain a grant and was able to pay me to the very start of this project, and then after, until the project was over. Our paper was accepted for publication, and I became the first female resident ever accepted to the Harvey Blank Department of Dermatology program at University of Miami. It was all because of Jim, and I owe my career as a dermatologist to Jim Fulton, and of course many other female residents that got accepted after me, I think should owe that position to Jim Fulton. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have known him and to have worked with him. Throughout the years of my residency and then after, I found him to be a curious and eager scientist, an excellent clinician, a teacher, a mentor, a sincere friend, and most importantly, a genuinely passionate and kind human being. As an example of his devotion to humanity, he joined Bernie Ackerman and volunteered to go to Israel and help the victim of Arab-Israeli war in Israel. He was a man of principle and conviction. He shared his knowledge with other community dermatologists and the residents happily and willingly. He never accepted any scientific article on its face value and frequently challenged its methodology, improvised the dosage, the administration, and the product formula, and came up with many, many inventions. He was the first one to find out that Botox could be diluted with preserved or non-preserved normal saline, whereas the authors had urged us to only dilute it with non-preserved normal saline. He also found out that Botox did not have to be diluted in 1 ml normal saline and could be diluted up to 5 or even more dilution with the same effectiveness. He also found out that Botox did not have to be used that day that was diluted and could be used up to 5 days and could be stored up to 10 days in the refrigerator. He was a true credit to the medical community, to our specialty of dermatology, and humanity in general. He will be missed greatly by all of us who came to know him. Thank you.
Luis de la Cruz.
Just a few words to try to explain what Dr. Fulton represented to our family. As long as I've known my wife, her mother and Sarah have been best friends. And when I married my wife, I recognized that I was marrying an extended family. For as long as I can remember, the Fultons have been part of our family. Our families have enjoyed and maintained a strong, loving bond over all the years. Through births, birthdays, baptisms, weddings, holidays, dinner parties, pig roasts, illnesses, funerals, we shared them all. On observing Jim at these celebrations and events over time, certain images come to mind. Him following Sarah around the or the kitchen to see what she was cooking up or what she was doing, what she was buying, what she was redecorating, what she was replacing. Sarah was a great source of joy, support, and stability for Jim. And I can't imagine him without her. I would describe Jim, the doctor, as a pioneer, brilliant, dedicated, accomplished, professional, yet would never hear anything like that from him. Maybe a little bit from Sarah every so often, but never from him. What you would hear from him and sense over and over was Jim's amazing childlike enthusiasm and joy in practicing and doing what he did, cutting-edge research and new product development. This is an amazing gift which too few of us share in our own careers. Jim showed a lifelong dedication and love to medicine, but in particular to his patients and his friends. I was a patient of Jim's. Most of my family were patients of Jim's. He was anything but typical. We've had many occasions to summon Jim at all times, at all hours, on all days, Sundays, Mondays, 7 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock at night. That's the only time we could reach him because the rest of the time he was working. And we'd always see the same guy with those glasses he used to wear and his camera hanging by his neck and always wanting to take a picture before anything. You know, let me take a picture first and then I'll come next week and take another picture. And just an amazing guy. How many doctors can you call upon at any time, at any hour of the day? How many of these would actually answer the phone? And how many would answer pleasantly? This is important to note because you could always hear the joy in his voice. He always greeted you with, "Hello, hello, Luis. Come on in, all right," which translated to, "Welcome, I care about you, don't worry, I'll fix it." He must have been tired, grumpy, and hungry, at least a few of those times. He never showed it. A man of dignity and grace, of great wisdom, humanity, and humility. A talented, gifted, loving family man, and a friend, large of stature and of heart, whose presence was always warmly felt, yet who was at times no louder than a whisper. We'll miss you dearly, Dr. Jim.
Dr. Carolyn Caperton.
Ironically enough, I believe the first encounter I had with Dr. Fulton was in Dr. Shaw's lab, and the first time I really got to talk with him was at Dr. Shaw's funeral. He had always wanted to do more projects, and he saw me in the lab and working in things, and he's, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on different formulations and creams," and I was a peon, I was a medical student, no one gave me much of a second look, and Dr. Fulton was always curious as to what everyone was doing, and there was no hierarchy at all, and he always wanted to know what everyone was doing, and everyone had a role and contributed. And he asked me, "Hey, do you want to do some more projects? I have lots of projects." And I said, "Yes, sir, I would love to do that." I said, "I'm your Gump," and he made fun of me and called me that for years on by, and that's just an honor that I even got to breathe the same air as him. And From that moment on, we were buddies, and anything he took me on, he was right there. That's me, under his wing. He was my mentor, he was my friend, and from someone who is just a peon and coming through medical school and coming through residency, and he never treated me that way. He treated me like a colleague, always, and he signed his emails James, and called me that in the phone, and called me that in clinic, introduced me as his partner in clinics when I was just observing to learn skills that will carry me through life. In that year between medical school and residency, I was working, I was volunteering for a year unpaid in the department, and Dr. Fulton said, are you gonna get evicted? How are you paying your rent? And I said, well, I'm not. And he's like, come work with me, and Miss Sarah and Dr. Fulton allowed me to come and work with them in clinic and product formulations, and in that year I lost my own father suddenly, and they were so very compassionate and have treated me like family. At a time when no one else would even consider me or pay me, they made me family. I owe my career to him and his beautiful wife, Miss Sarah, and Kelly, and everybody in the office. And as Dr. Burke mentioned, we studied botulism, botulinum toxin, and the experiments that we've done, it's just funny. You can always see Dr. Fulton with his visor on his head, and hello, hello, and he has his needle in hand, and he's ready to get anybody within range. So if you were in the office or in church or in nearby at the grocery store, you were going to be in an experiment. And he would convince you that this was, everybody's taking part in the scientific endeavors. And we had these half-face studies, and I have really cool pictures of like half of my face with Botox, half with Dysport, and we've learned lots of things. And he was always the first to sign up as the guinea pig. And these are things that we all need to remember, and what it's like to be a patient. And that's something that we've all kind of experienced. And when a doctor becomes a patient, it's such a humbling experience. To go from this position of power, and this is what you do, and the doctor's orders, and he never acted that way at all. In all of his life, as a physician, he was always a friend. He was always a suggestion. It was always this is what we believe, this is what we've learned, this is what we're studying, what we're still studying. And for a doctor to make the transition to patient, I can only imagine, when we don't make the best patients all the time, and it's just very humbling experience. So he always had me doing things, and he was always curious, and I was always just trying to keep up. And there was always Sundays at the Fultons when Miss Sarah would cook, and we would do journal club basically, and we'd sit there and we'd discuss, and we would wonder about why did they do that this way. And I was like, well, I don't know. I think this guy's the expert in the field, And he's like, let's write to him, let's call him, let's see why he did that. And he made science and medicine accessible to me and to everyone. There was never a patient that, if you couldn't afford something, he would make it work. He would make a payment plan. He would make something happen, or he wouldn't accept a payment at all. He would do things for the love of the patient, for the love of the science. And he just always treated me like a colleague. And the things he's taught me about scientific curiosity, product formulation, patient care, scientific methodology, and moreover just compassion, that I will carry with me for life. And I owe my career to Dr. Fulton. If I never practice dermatology, I will always practice care, whether that's skin care, medical care, and otherwise. The things that I have learned from him and his family, you guys are family to me. So I love you, Dr. Fulton, and bye, 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 bye.
Dr. Peter Wenshu.
I should preface my remarks by noting that Jim and Sarah were a team. Where I've used the pronoun he, I could just as easily use they in many cases. Technically, I knew Jim Fulton for over 30 years. We met when I was a resident and he a professor at the University of Miami, Department of Dermatology. Shortly thereafter, however, he followed his children to California, and for over 20 years, my only contact with him was through his articles in the dermatology literature. When he followed his family back east, he made the effort to renew our acquaintance. I was flattered that this giant in the field would remember me. A dinner invitation followed, and it was Anne's turn to be impressed, if not humbled, by Sarah's cooking. A return invitation was required, but to avoid any embarrassing food comparisons, we planned a trip, an afternoon on our boat. I learned a few things about Jim then. I learned that he'd sailed on the West Coast and he made great crew. And I learned that he could swim. On land, as you all know, Jim walked with a limp, and with his white hair and beard, he looked older than his years, if not a little frail. But in the water, he was a totally different animal, akin to a dolphin. I expressed this to Sarah when then she said, "Oh, but Jim swam varsity at Penn." So I learned that he could swim very well. Our acquaintance quickly evolved into friendship with many enjoyable times together. Two of these occasions bear mentioning as they reflect on Jim's generosity and his dedication. Jim and Sarah met Dr. Susan Angulo, Associate Provost of St. Thomas University, over dinner at our house, and he promptly offered science students there the opportunity to get a priceless experience in dermatology at the university and at the Vivant Lab. Jim was a great teacher and always generous with his time. In the second case, we were spending a night with our mutual friends, Bill and Kim Cook, in Key Largo. When I arose, Jim was standing in the laundry room, writing a paper on the dryer. It's just one illustration of Jim's total dedication to dermatology and to the management of acne in particular. He was instrumental in developing Retin-A and benzoyl peroxide, two mainstays of acne therapy throughout the past 40 years. He and Sarah were continually developing new products at Vivant, and when he moved back east, he promptly joined the voluntary faculty at the university, teaching residents, writing papers, attending grand rounds where I would see him frequently. Jim's dedication to his profession was unsurpassed. It seemed to me that Sunday was for family and faith, but the rest of the time was to be used productively. Actually, Dr. Caperton tells me he worked on Sunday too. As a result of this dedication, Jim was easily one of the 5 or 6 most impressive people I have ever met. This is the Jim Fulton that the world will miss. But I also will miss his selfless willingness to help, his generosity, his easy, high-pitched laugh. I'm sure we are all saddened that we will not hear it again.
Dr. William Cook.
I think wherever Jim is tonight, if he's looking down on this group, he would be very excited to see all of you here. He had that feeling for people that sort of surpassed. And it just extended throughout his life and everything, as people have mentioned tonight. You know, in life, things come in threes. And Jim had 3 things always with him. He had Sarah, and she was always watching his back. You know, he was kind of a absent-minded professor at times, as you probably know if you've been with him. seemed to be misdirected at times, but always plunging ahead, exploring new things, looking for the what ifs and the I don't knows. So he had Sarah there, and she covered for him, and she helped him. And without that backbone, we might not have seen this great Jim because of his pathway. But she was the guiding force, and the food she cooked kept him going, and kept all of us going too. That's why I am a little heavy now, because she made the best pecan pies in the world. But so he had Sarah with her, and he had two other things. He always had his computer with him, because he was always working and thinking of doing things. Whether we would go out on the boat, we'd go out for a day on the water. He'd have his computer with him. If we were down in St. Croix, or wherever we were, traveling through France together, going to wineries, he had his computer with him, and he would disappear and he'd be working on something. He'd say, come on, Jim, well, I'm gonna do this, I gotta do this. So he was always thinking and enjoying what was in his soul, and that was medicine, dermatology, and science. And he had something else. The third thing he had with him was his Speedo. From his days at Tulane, his swimming never left him. I'd say, "Are we going to swim today?" He would reach in his pocket, no matter almost wherever we were, he pulled out his Speedo. In fact, we were down in St. Croix. We were lucky enough, we had several couples down there, and we got into this little house that we had rented, and it was beautiful in the water, but the realtor had told us that we shouldn't swim there because it was dangerous, it was rocky, and we just shouldn't do it. All of a sudden, Jim disappeared. Couldn't find him. And we look out, and there's this thing chugging up and down, and man, he really swam. He swam almost like a shark going through the water. And so we were a little worried, but so a little while later he shows up in the house, all bruised up and cut up. But no matter. He was doing what he enjoyed and loved. He had passion for things that he did. So he was a silent giant, I like to think of him, because he was humble, but the things that he did from the beginning to the end were focused on what he loved. His people around him, his wife, his friends, dermatology, science, and research. So we'll remember him for what he was, and we'll miss him greatly. Thank you.
Esther Jean and Claudia Martin.
Good evening. Tonight we gather here to celebrate the life of an amazing man, Dr. James Fulton. My name is Esther Jean, and beside me we have Claudia Martin, and we're students from St. Thomas University. This summer we had the opportunity and the privilege to have work as interns and to shadow Dr. Fulton both in a research lab and in his clinic. The moment we walked into his facility, he sincerely welcomed us with open arms and his great sense of humor. He shared with me and to many his passion. He did not treat me nor his staff as an intern or as his students. We felt more like his colleagues. The short time we spent together, he taught us all that he could. I must add, Dr. Fulton was one funny man. He brought laughter and sense of peace into every room he walked into. Other than being an outstanding physician, he also was a loving, kind-hearted, and a humble human being. The moment I have shared an experience with Dr. Fulton, along with the knowledge that he chose to share with me, will forever be engraved in my memory. It has been a blessing from God to have known such a prestigious individual.
Good evening. It's nice to see that so many people appreciated and cared for Dr. Fulton. Summoning the courage to speak at this memorial is difficult, but it gives us a chance to honor a great man who accomplished many things. Dr. Fulton not only taught me about dermatology, but about history, work ethics, and having an optimistic perspective in life. Knowing him for only 2 months, I found that he was the happiest man I've ever gotten the privilege to meet. Both at Vivant and at Flores Dermatology, Dr. Fulton seemed like the gel that held everyone in sync. I thank God for blessing me with the opportunity to shadow a man with a personality, mind, and heart that is seen only once in a lifetime. The amazing individuals that Dr. Fulton worked with will continue his legacy. His dreams were left in very good hands. Thank you.
Sam Patil.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Sam. I'm Dr. Fulton's research assistant. And I'd like to introduce to you his team. This is Martha. She works with us in the clinic. She's helped Dr. Fulton for years, and he loves her, absolutely adores her. There's Cecilia. She's the administrator. Graciela, our esthetician. Fatima, the lab assistant. And Olga. We don't know her position. She's like his right hand. But we came up here with the intention of saying a few things about him, but words just won't do him justice. We had the immense honor and privilege of working alongside with the most extraordinary human being and physician. Not only were we his employees, but he really did make us feel like family. He shared with us his immense knowledge, his biggest passion, dermatology, and sometimes his cookies. He's been a great inspiration for all of us. We will miss his funny laughter, his sense of humor, and all the confidence that he instilled upon all his patients. One of Dr. Fulton's favorite phrases was, "Do some push-ups and keep going." I don't know about the push-ups, but we plan to keep going. We as a team plan to carry on his legacy. We love you, Dr. Fulton.
We love you, Dr. Fulton. Thank you.
If anyone else would like to come up and share a story or a memory, please feel free to do so at this time. This is my brother, James Fulton.
Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. It's beautiful to see all you here in memory of my father. I would also like to give a special thanks to Ronnie Cole, his friend from New Orleans, who came down and is playing the piano tonight. One funny story that I have about my father is that when I was younger, he used to always tell me, life's too short, and I didn't get it. I was a perfectionist, and still am, and would sit and do things over and over again until I got them right, or until I felt that they were right. But I just wanted to tell him that I finally understand what he meant by life's too short, and that he did a lot of amazing things in the amount of time that he was with us and the short amount of time that he was here. So thank you all for coming.
I'm going to give you now a very special blessing. It's from the book of Numbers in the Bible. And according to the Bible, when God spoke to Moses, told him, "From now on, tell your brother Aaron, the high priest, and his children, that this is the way that they should bless the people of Israel, that by extension we as Christians are also the people of Israel." So please bow your heads. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord be with you and give you peace now and forever. Amen.
As my brother mentioned, the beautiful music this evening is being played by a family friend and a good friend of my father, Ronnie Cole from New Orleans. At this time, I'd like to give the opportunity to Ronnie to come up and speak for a moment.
Well, as Jim would usually say when you called him up, hello, hello, hello. And once was enough, Jim. I'll tell you, when we first met Jim, my wife Gardner and myself met Jim and Sarah, and he looked at my wife, her complexion is absolutely flawless. And old ugly piano player here, and he looked at her and said, Cole, you don't need any work done, but you do, looking at my wife. And that's the way Jim was. You couldn't get mad at him. We go back to Newport Beach. Actually, we go back before that, although I didn't know him. But when he was in school at Tulane, which is in New Orleans, in case anyone has not been down there, he said he used to sneak in my club, Cole's Corner on Bourbon Street, and come in and hear me play. But we had never met until quite a few years ago. I think one of the great stories that Jim would say, he loved Sarah probably more than medicine, and he loved her cooking. And if anyone has ever been to the house of the Fultons, you know that Sarah can cook up a storm. Well, my wife and myself, we do a fundraiser at our home right outside of New Orleans, out on the bayou, and it's called Jazz on the Bayou, and we've given over $1,200,000 to certain charities that we have chosen. And this is, just a backyard event, so it's a lot of money. And we get all of our chef friends to come out and cook. And one year, Paul Prudhomme, who came all the time, decided he was going to have some kind of a cooking contest and let people get into it. And Sarah got into it. And all Jim could say with such a smile on his face all the time, I've never seen her such a nervous wreck. I think that was a highlight of his life. But Jim was just a dear, dear friend to both Gardner and myself. And the loss, like it is to all of you, is really a great loss to the two of us. But his memory will always live on, and Sarah will always be there with us, and we thank you for that. And you better come down to Chateau Cole on the bayou. And Bill Cook, yes, I remember in France when we took all of you over there, and all he was doing was studying, but he did want to see some cathedrals and all that, and what a great time we all had over there with that. I'd like to close the evening out by doing what I do best, and that is playing the piano. And Sarah said she didn't want this to be a sad thing. She wanted me to play, certain tunes like Memory, which I played a little bit of, and Unforgettable. In other words, Jim, great memories. He's unforgettable. He's somewhere over the rainbow. But now I'd like to close the evening out with the song that I'm most associated with throughout the States and various parts of the world. I've had the great pleasure to have performed and recorded this live in concert at the most prestigious concert hall in the world today, Carnegie Hall. I've had the unbelievable opportunity to play this for 6 presidents. But the most memorable experience of my life was when I performed this at the Papal Mass for His Holiness Pope John Paul II. And so tonight, I will have the same feelings playing this for Jim as I had playing this for the soon-to-be saint, Pope John Paul II. And I'm going to follow this with, and we're going to get a little hand clapping going. And as they say down in the Cajun country, we're going to pass a good time. Enjoy Amazing Grace.
Jim comes to march with. Yes, Jim. Yes, my Jim. Yes, my Jim comes to march with. That's all.
In the name